Hi, my friends. My name is Rinaldo Aguiar, and today is June 23rd, 2025. It's about 10 a.m. here in Katy, Texas, 77494. Welcome, curious minds, to another episode of Law Enforcement Rapid Fire Tips. So today, I have a few things that I would like to talk about. So first of all, right, I would like to do a small postmortem of yesterday's visit to that Dockerhood in Southwest Houston. But before we get into that, a couple of things. One, I have to say, like, these observations about the Dockerhood visit, I haven't run them through the pipeline because I haven't gone to the other house where I can connect to the system. It's too dangerous to do it here. They would intercept the cookies and game over. Like these observations about yesterday specifically. So yesterday was June 22nd, 2025. Are tentative, but I'm pretty confident. And they're also incomplete. For example, until I run them through the pipeline, I won't have the exact GPS locations and the addresses joined with the images. That's something that I do programmatically because it's too much work to do it manually. It will take days, right, to do that. You have for an hour of video. And it's on multiple cameras, and it's a lot of work. So I do that with the pipeline. That said, I'm pretty confident about the observations. So that's the first note. Now, but before we get into the actual postmortem, let's talk about why do a postmortem. Yesterday, I posted a video and I watched it afterwards. And I do this thing where after I create a video, I watch it to see if I missed something or to see if there's something that is not clear or could be misinterpreted. So I was watching the video, and I think that there was a couple of things that after I saw the video, like even if I knew these things, right, they were like aha moments for me when I saw the video. So one is that realization that Harold Martinez could be a juncture point between these two very important mega clusters, important in terms of the liability they bring to Diosdado Cabello. Because remember, all this is part of the campaign that I'm advancing. Bring Diosdado to justice, bring Diosdado to the US. So those two mega clusters are important in that sense because they carry a lot of liability for Diosdado Cabello directly, personally. Because it's easy to do all these things when you're in a foreign country with your house surrounded by military bases and you see no repercussions on yourself as a person, right? It's very easy to do these kind of things to the rest of the world. But if you come to the US, it would be interesting to see how forward you really are. Anyhow, so there were a couple of observations yesterday that when I saw them in the video, I was like, I think I'm into something here. One is that Harold Martinez could be a juncture point between these two mega clusters, right? The CIA, what I call the CIA mega cluster and the SEBIN mega cluster. And risky to say the obvious, the commonality in these two clusters is that both are intelligence services. One is domestic to the US, and the other one is foreign, Venezuelan intelligence service. But the commonality is that both are mostly intelligent service agents come from the cluster. So that's in itself, it's very telling. But the aha moment really was that Harold could be the junction point and between these two mega clusters. And then from that, I don't want to say that I extrapolated, that helped me form an idea that maybe this is a technique. This is how the Iranians, first of all, that because Harold is Venezuelan Iranian, I suspect, right? Could be another Arabic country, let's say Iranian, for the sake of the argument. The idea that formed was that maybe that's how they do it, by using or employing dual citizens that have the citizenship of Iran or strong family ties to Iran, and a second citizenship. And that allows them to act as a pivot between Iran, this other country that they're citizens of, and another actor like Russia or China or Cuba. So those kind of citizens could be a good pivot point. Now, and this is just speculation, what I'm going to say. I don't have any proofs to back this up, but it reminded me a lot, this thing about the dual citizenship. It reminded me having family ties to Iran. It reminded me a lot of something I saw in Netflix University, which is one of those documentaries about the mafia in New York in the 80s, the Italian mafia. In one of those documentaries, they said that for you to be made, meaning for you to become part of the group of bosses, right, in this lieutenants on this criminal organization, you had to have been born in Italy and have both parents being Italian, right? And the reasoning they gave in the documentary is that way they could trace all your relatives back to their old country, And if you flip or if you cooperate with authorities, they will execute everybody in Italy. That's what the documentary said. I don't know if that's accurate, but so it's a veiled threat, right, to assure compliance and to make sure that you don't rat on anybody to the authorities. And in the case of Saab, it seemed to work that way. Like as soon as he was arrested, I remember I saw in the news that his family, because his wife, he has a wife with a model or something. Like I think she was Argentinian. Like, I don't recall the details, but she was not Venezuelan. But the moment he got arrested, she and the kids were flown to Caracas, right, and kept in Caracas during the entire period that he was arrested, something like that, right? Like, it's a veiled threat. If you talk, we're going to give them the microplastics food supplementation. And I think he didn't talk, right? So it worked. So maybe it could be one of the reasons, right? Like assure compliance of this person, and that if things go south, the person won't talk because he will try to preserve the lives of, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 of their relatives. So that's one thought. So those two observations, I think, were key yesterday. And then after I made that video in the early afternoon, I went and did something that I was planning to do for a long time. But I did it because I wanted to take temperature. I did it yesterday specifically after I released that video because I wanted to take the temperature. And it's like a way of gathering feedback. I've seen this, like when I say something in these videos, so I post something online, depending on how effective it is as a weapon against them, they react to a certain degree. Like, I can tell at this point, I don't want to say measure, but I can sense, right? Like the level of gravity that they perceive in what I'm saying. Yesterday, it seemed to have been like a nuclear bomb, right? I've never seen them this desperate as yesterday. I don't think. Not even when I was trying to buy another Escape Valley side. Not even. I think the peak that I've seen them was occasions like when I tried to talk to Agent Cody, who was supposedly an FBI agent. Like those days, they were panicking. I could see it. Or when I captured the geo index, or when I developed the first version of Spy Hell, I can sense the level of desperation. And yesterday, I think it was the peak. I've never seen anything like yesterday before. So I think, well, I'm saying all this because to say that I think that yesterday's observations are probably on the right track. Meaning Iran is probably the one orchestrating all this, like at the top of the top, right? And then Harold is probably a key individual that carries a lot of liability, Harold Martinez. And he's probably here in Houston, as I insinuated yesterday. I didn't say it explicitly, but all I said yesterday points to that Harold is here in Katy, Texas, or here in Houston. And they reacted in this way. And this observation about using dual citizens, one of the citizenships being Iranian, like Pierre Midyar, Harold Martinez, and Alex Saab, and others, right? And I hypothesize that there might be one individual out there who might be Iranian-Cuban to serve as a liaison between Amazon and eBay. So that I don't know who that is right now. There might be one individual out there with those characteristics. And has to be a billionaire, has to be marked in the geo index with high paramilitary scores. It's probably easy to find for the feds. So anyhow, after I posted that, they reacted. I'm going to try to describe what I sensed, what I saw from my vantage point. And when I make this analogy, it's not a derogative comment in any way, because I want to talk about insects. I'm not saying that I think they're insects. I'm not saying that at all, but it's the best analogy I can find. I don't know if you've seen when you see a colony of ants, if you don't disturb them, you see the paths that the ants take when they walk. It's very structured. It's very like, if you look at it from above, it looks like they know where they're going. They have a task in mind. I don't know if they have minds, but it looks like they have a task. They have a clear goal, a clear path, and they know where they're going. But if you by mistake a step on their colony, then it creates chaos. They start like walking or running around randomly, not knowing exactly where to go. But they're still moving, like they don't stay static. They move, and they move faster than if you don't disturb the colony. But they don't really, it's obvious that they don't have a plan, that they're just like circling around, trying to figure it out. That's how it felt yesterday. And this is interesting because these agents on the ground are usually low-level agents. They're like Uber drivers. That would be the best analogy to describe. Like they don't know exactly what they're doing. They're just following what the app says. They know it's something criminal because they're getting paid in crypto. They're using the secret app with the panic button, right? That hides the content. if they don't do some sequence on the phone. And they're getting paid on the Bitcoin ATMs, the Bitcoin depot ATMs, for example. They know it's something criminal, but they don't know exactly how it works or the mechanics of the interception of the radio frequency. Like, they don't know those things, usually. But because Katy is such a small town, I imagine, and I know that they know who I am. Like, in one occasion, and I document this on the website, like, in one occasion, I went to Tamaron, to that street where Penelope Suarez lives. And I went there by surprise. Like, I didn't tell anybody that I was going there. I didn't text Penelope that I was going there. I didn't say anything. But the minute I got to that street, it was impressive. Like, these people started like hiding behind the trees. Like, they would run out of the cars to get inside of their houses. Like, it looked like, I felt like I was in a movie. Like, I couldn't believe it. And I'm talking about dozens of individuals, if not half a hundred or 100 individuals. So I know they know who I am, because of course their job is at this point is to follow me and to intercept me, and so they know who I am. Right? But in general, I think in a general situation, these agents wouldn't know exactly who is the target or why the target is important to the network. They just know that they have to drive in this direction, stop at this corner, and wait for the red Tesla to pass by, and then make a left if the red Tesla makes a right, things like that. But yesterday, I could see in their faces, and I'll show you some examples, because I have the footage and I downloaded it, and I already posted all the videos in YouTube. So I'll show you some examples. You could see in their faces, like their actions, that they're desperate, and they know that themselves, the agents on the ground, perceive the danger. So that's very interesting to me, because it means that, and remember, this network uses information asymmetry as a basic functioning principle. Meaning they don't tell the agents that they're in trouble, right? Or that they could get in trouble, or that I have this technology. They don't tell them any of this, because they wouldn't work. If they see all those risks, they would leave. Speaking of that, I have to make a note, and I'm sorry, I'm going to make a pause here, but I have to apologize for something I said yesterday. I was reflecting on that and after I said it, and when I watched the video, and it was really wrong on my part to do this. I have to say it. So yesterday, I made fun of a woman, an older lady, recounting an incident in which she came to intercept audio from, or to extract audio from Penelope's sun visor after we ran. And she was praying and like doing this cross thing sign as she was approaching Penelope, pointing at her with her phone. And I joked about it, saying that it was funny to me that a person knows he's committing a crime, but instead of not committing the crime, the person chooses to pray that nothing bad happens as they're committing the crime. And I was reflecting on that, and it was wrong of me to make fun of that woman, because, and I wrote this at some point, I think a year ago, right? Many months ago. I realized that I'm a prisoner of the Islado Cabello at this point. But still, I can go only from this house to the other house. But if I go anywhere else, they harass me and follow me, and I feel my life threatened. I feel my security, my safety is threatened. So I can't go running on the park. If I want to run, I have to run on the backyard of my house. And that's the only place that I can run, like circled by a fence, like in a prison, literally. So I'm a prisoner of the Islado Cabello, even today. I know that. But they're also prisoners, right? Like these agents, these 7 agents that they have deployed here in Katy, they can't leave. Even if they wanted to quit, they can't quit. And it's not out of loyalty or patriotism or not even money. It's that they have family in Venezuela. And if they quit, right, they will do something to their family. That's the veiled threat. It's the same principle that I was describing at the beginning with the Iranians and Saad, at a lower scale, at a lower level. But, you know, their families would lose benefits in Venezuela. They won't have anything to eat, right? They won't get medical attention. They may have elderly parents back home. There's a lot of situations. And I think if that woman, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if that woman went to the length of knowing she's committing a crime and she could get in trouble, and she went to the length of not doing it, but praying, it must mean that she has something that keeps her prisoner in that situation. So yeah, I should not have made fun of that. So anyhow, yes. So yesterday, right, I could see the desperation in their faces, and how erratic their movements were, disorganized, almost as if the software wasn't working. And the thing that information asymmetry, right? That was the comment I was making, that this network is known for, at least to me, for using information asymmetry as a tool to manage people and to make them feel comfortable even in situations that are dangerous to them. So why were these agents panicking yesterday? Something leaked within the organization, even to all these bottom agents, because this was like a 2 hours trip that I took yesterday to measure temperature and to do something important that I wanted to do for a long time. And I haven't been able to because I'm in this situation where I'm imprisoned at this point. But I was thinking of why is that these agents on the ground, all of them during 2 hours, like what I'm talking about, like 100 agents. Why were all these so panicky yesterday? Is it that something leaked? But it's unlikely that something would leak to that level, right? To that, at that scale, that everybody on the ground knows that they're in danger. It's unlikely. The other option I see is that they stop using. So in this system is really a distributed computing system, okay? In distributed computing systems, we have this concept that we call a leaf. And this comes from Google. And this system that they have is a copy of a very important Google system. And this is documented on the website. But I call these low-level agents the Uber drivers, basically. The leaves, they're the most important, the most effective part of the system. But one of the properties of the leaves is that if the leaf dies or gets compromised, nothing happens. Like the system, it's agnostic to the presence or absence of a leaf. It could be replaced by another leaf very easily. And it has a lot of other properties, like one important property that has to do with information asymmetry is the fact that the leaves always in distributed systems are designed to have a myopic view of the situation, meaning that the leaf can only see the things that the leaf needs to work, nothing else. And this is a design principle that should be respected in any distributed system because it leads to a lot of important properties for the entire system. Now we're going to get into detail because this would take 4 hours, but this is a way of saying that an Uber, like this diabolical Uber that they have, driver, right, that is driving around intersecting radio frequency or marking locations of the target, should not know anything, right? Only what he needs to know, meaning only where to go and where to stand and at what speed to go, nothing else, right? And because of this leads to this property that the leaves can be replaced. They're interchangeable, but precisely because of that is that the information asymmetry is important in this context. And what I saw yesterday is that all these ground agents were aware, very aware, to the point that we're panicking. You could see, you will see it on their eyes, right? This leads me to think that maybe they stopped using the leaves and now they're using higher level agents like real FSB, real 7RAS leaves. They demoted their function to basically flush out all the real leaves, and now the leaves are actual intelligence officers. And if this, which would be aware of what's happening, right, to some degree. So this is important because, and this then drives me to this conclusion, right? I think what I got, the footage I got yesterday, it's a gold mine of counterintelligence. Like there's no other way to put it. Every 5 seconds, I would get one. And I haven't run this through the pipeline, so take it with a grain of salt. But from what I could see from my vantage point as a human, right, having only the computing power of one human, it seemed to me like that footage is a gold mine. And it's posted on YouTube. I'll show you how to isolate it quickly. So if you go to YouTube / at rapid fire tips, click on this see more link, and then click on one of the last links that says this one, call mobile raw. Click on that, and then click on playlist, and then there's the Dockerhood. So this one that says June 22nd, Dockerhood visit. And all the videos are here. So these are all the videos. I was using 5 cameras yesterday, but only, so 2 cameras are covered. They're not visible or not easily visible. And 3 cameras are external. So I'm only posting the external cameras because I don't want to give away where I've hidden the other cameras. This is basically 3 channels. It's basically left, right, and back. And both the left and the right are positioned in a way that they have an angle. And then together, they can basically give you the front, the whole 100 degrees of the front view anyways. So you basically have a 360-degree view of the vehicle, right? Only with 3 cameras. So that's a way to get the footage. Okay, now that I've mentioned Dockerhood, right? This is an important concept, and it's documented in the website in spyhelp.org/evidence. Please check it out. The idea, and I'm going to quickly explain what it means. The idea is that this network, instead of, they don't, and this is a general design principle in general, right? Like they don't do one-offs. And I mentioned this before. if they want to do something to a target, even kill a target, they're not going to sit down and think how to. Like they have kind of a menu, right? Like a catalog of standard operating procedures that they've developed through the last 50 years, I believe, or maybe more. And they have all these things already specified how they would do it. And they pick one. That's what they do. And the same with how to deploy agents on the ground in the US and in other countries. It's not like they're going to start looking around to see what properties they're going to buy. Like they don't deploy houses, they don't deploy agents, they deploy communities, right? So they work at a community or a small town cell. So they sometimes build entire towns, like the entire town. That's the case of Katy, Texas. 90% of all the properties in Katy are controlled by them. So that's where the concept Dockerhood comes in. And I have some explanatory videos in the Spy Hell official channel. Please check them out. 2-minute videos, and they explain very quickly how it works. But basically, imagine an apartment complex like the one I went to visit yesterday. They build the complex, right? They already have the blueprints, and they, in fact, it's so much so that they reuse the exact same blueprint for multiple apartment complexes, even in the same area. So you enter to one and another, and then they look exactly the same, like the way the streets inside the complex are distributed, the locations of the buildings, like everything is standardized, right? And inside each building, and by the way, one of these buildings is where they're keeping my son. It's one of these Dockerhoods. Yeah, there's no other way to say it. And inside of the building, the location of the agents, it's predetermined. They know that in the apartment building 3, second floor, apartment 7, there's going to be a doctor. And then on the building 5, third floor, apartment 45, there's going to be a lawyer, right? All these things are predetermined, and they're important because they cannot move them, really. Because the location, like the relative location of the antennas, is important so these nodes can talk. Because remember, they isolate the network, this private secret network they have for crime. They isolate the subchannels, the subnetworks, by function. So it is important that the relative position of these agents is known and specific and specified in a way that they can talk to each other depending on their function, right? Doctors talk to doctors, engineers talk to engineers, lawyers talk to lawyers, etc. Intelligence officers talk to intelligence officers, and that's the way they manage it. And then if they want to spy, if they have a new target, right? There's a guy that is doing let me make a hypothetical example, right? There's a guy that is making a startup on AI, and he lives in, I don't know, Tulsa, right? What they do, they start deploying these Dockerhoods surrounding that guy, right? And that it costs a lot of money, right? It could cost, I don't know how to put a number to $100 million, $200 million. But again, first, that is no object for this network because they're getting their income, a lot of it, from the drug trade, from Diosdado Cabello. And they're not paying taxes on that money. And they're using crypto and the Bitcoin depot ATMs to move that money. So it really, what is $100 million for them, the amount of effort it would take to produce that $100 million of real effort could be a 10-fold, maybe 100-fold. I don't know. I haven't done statistics on these metrics, but it is an interesting exercise for financial investigators. Like try to find a conversion rate between real money and this synthetic money that they create with the drug trade, right? It's important to understand what is the factor of advantage they're getting from Diosdado Cabello by injecting this drug money into their network. Because obviously they're operating in a completely different set of circumstances. While I'm paying taxes, right, as a person, to help maintain the city and to help maintain the roads and the hospitals, right? None of them are paying taxes, right? And on top of that, all of them are coordinated to harm me personally. It's how can I win that fight? Saying this because, so it may cost $100 million, right, to deploy a few of these clusters around this hypothetical new target. But if they steal technology, that company could be worth $3, $5, $10 billion in 2 or 3 years. So it's a good business. It's a good investment and money laundering mechanism. They could make 30 times their investment in clean money. And remember, the investment didn't really cost them anything because they cultivated this drug in South America, put them in some of these ships controlled by Wilmer Ruperi, and then they sold them at a super high price in North America or Europe. It's a tremendous business model, the one that they have. And at the same time, as they're deploying these clusters and doing this to control technology, really, which is the goal, at the same time, they are attacking the country, or whatever country that is that they're doing this in. I'm putting this example in Tulsa, but it could be in France, could be anywhere. Because those operatives are also used to do other things, create inflation, and I'll explain how they do it. Or one of the ways that I saw that how they're doing it. They spy on election personnel, and then eventually they control the government locally and in the country. And they end up controlling the entire country, right, through this technique. So that's what the Dockerhoods do. That's how they work, basically. So yesterday, I'm saying all this to explain that yesterday's visit was a visit that I had pending to do to one of these Dockerhoods that my system had identified as high ranking in terms of paramilitary scores. And I wanted to scan inside. So these Dockerhoods are, because they're apartment complexes or gated communities like Lake Point Estates. They're closed usually, so there is a gate. Sometimes I can't get in, but sometimes they make the mistake and the car comes in and I'm able to come in, and I'm not doing anything illegal. It's not a controlled area. Anybody can go in. Like the road itself inside of the complex is public road, even though if it's in private property, I think they cannot prevent it from entering. So I enter, right? And with the cameras, I record all the plates. And last year, I've been doing this for almost 2 years at this point. For the last 6 months, I've been in prison. So I haven't been able to do it. But before that, I was doing it on a daily basis. And I have hours and hours of this footage. And this is how I train the models, right? That allow me to do all this detection, anomaly detection. Because I have several thousands of their plates recorded and the vehicle features with these cameras and analyzed with computer vision. So anyhow, yesterday I went to do this visit to this Dockerhood. And before I get into the details of what I saw, right, which I think is the main goal here today, I want to explain a technique or pass the information. I don't want to say explain it because it's not like I know a lot and I don't really. I'm just passing observations. Yeah, so the technique is, you know how they have the geo index that I captured, and that's basically like an overlay that you could put on top of a map, and it has geographical locations and metadata recorded in that database. And that metadata has a meaning, okay? This really what they have is a tiered security system where the information is tiered. And this geo index is like the top tier in terms of security. It was like the most secret database that I think. Maybe they have something more secret than this, but it has the crypto payments. Like it has the smoking gun of all the financial crimes for decades. And some murders even are recorded in this database. So this has to be one of the top tier databases in terms of security implications. But they have lower tiers, in which they rely solely, so they use public data sources, and then they rely on obscurity to make sure that nobody understands, or they thought that nobody would understand what they were recording. But the idea is to use a public data source and embed information encoded in a way that is not obvious. But then they have a computer system that looks at these images. It's usually in images, okay? Looks at these images and can find, because the system knows the pattern. So let me give you an example. Imagine a map of your city, okay? And I'm going to create a fictitious system just to illustrate the idea. In my fictitious system, an app to sell drugs to drug users' houses that have a roof colored purple mean that the person is a drug dealer, okay? I'm going to make that up. It's just an example, right? So what they would do, they would then contact their drug dealers and coordinate. So all of the drug dealers paint their roof with purple paint, right? That way, they could have an app looking at the satellite imagery from Google Maps, for example. And if you want to buy drugs, if you're a user of this hypothetical fictitious app, if you want to buy drugs, what all the system has to do is to look at Google Maps, find houses, detect in those images what could be classified as houses that, when looked at from above, have purple roofs, and then direct the user, the drug buyer, to the closest house that have a purple roof. That way, in this hypothetical system, I'm only using Google Maps as storage for my app. I don't even need to create my own database because I'm just using something that is publicly available, like Google Maps. And I'm just making my drug dealers hypothetical. I'm not a drug lord, but I'm just making my hypothetical drug dealers paint the roofs with a particular color so my app can identify them. So that's the technique. And through that analysis of planet scale using the technologies I've developed, I have this system, Spy Health Pipeline. It's documented on the website, on the evidence page, that is able to find these patterns across the world. And at this point, I've decoded some of their lexicon. When I say lexicon, I mean, what are the things in this imagery that have a meaning? And then based on other things like public data records and social media accounts and things like that, when the system sees the pattern repeatedly across different places in the world, not even in the same city, in the world, because this is planet scale, then it allows me as a person to interpret that and infer what could be the meaning of this particular marker in that lexicon. For example, and remember, I have, and the system has, the geo-index. So it's not only the presence of the roof. The question is, okay, is this observation, in my example, houses observed that have a purple roof in Florida, are all of those houses marked in the index with a certain level of paramilitary score? If the answer is yes, that is a marker, because what are the chances that all these houses have this commonality and also are marked in this database of Elon Musk with a high paramilitary score? So the paramilitary score and the geo-index are the key that unlocks this achievement. I was doing anomaly detection before at a hyper-local level, as you see, by recording the plates and the features of the cars and the behavior of the drivers and using machine learning to detect anomalies. But the way I was able to scale it to planet scale, what unlocked that massive achievement was the possession of the geo-index. That was the mistake. That was the mistake they made that led them to this point. And that's why they're trying still to kill me. Anyhow, which that's another question, right? And I don't know, maybe somebody, a psychologist. I think this is a question more for a psychologist, really. Why do they keep trying to intercept me? Like thinking about it logically, like the data is already public. I'm making all these videos, like the videos are already there. The liability is already there. Somebody will see these videos in the future. And even if they delete them from YouTube, I have made backups and I've sent letters to people saying what the backups are. So what is the point, really? I have a theory, but I don't know. It's a question either for a psychologist or for a strategist. They're either geniuses or crazy. I don't know. I think the problem they have is that they cannot extract the entire town, right? So they have to be following visually to be able to understand where I'm going so they can hide the cars on the fly. And I saw this pattern yesterday where as I was driving, people were like taking cars out of the streets and then moving them to garages. And you will see a couple of examples of this that I'm going to show you. So if I can describe it in a way, it's wherever I go, they hide the cars. But it's also silly because they can hide. We're talking about 20,000, 40,000 vehicles. Like how are they going to hide all those vehicles every time I go out? Not even knowing where I'm going to drive to. It's just a stupid idea, really. So I don't know. It puzzles me why that level of desperation for following me yesterday. I don't really understand it. There has to be a reason, right? There has to be a why. And they're not going to do this just because. Why act so desperately? Why go through the legal that I keep recording more agents committing crimes? For what purpose? What is the potential gain on this? I don't really understand it. But anyhow, so that's the concept of the markers. So I'm going to show you some examples of markers, right? So you can see how they work. But I'm going to mention first, so these are what I call geo features. Okay, so basically what they're doing is using the planet as a node, as a database. And then they record things in that database by modifying the landscape as it's looked from above, from a satellite. So to then be able to analyze satellite imagery, both from Google Maps and from their own private satellites, because they have satellites themselves, like the countries, right? Russia has satellites, China has satellites. So they use their own private satellites with real-time visuals. And for the app that is publicly available for the Lyft, for the Uber drivers, as I call them, they use Google Maps, right? Which is not updated as frequently. But again, they control Maxar and they control TerraTech and Airbus. And if they want to update the image, they can update it in seconds. So that's not, the latency of the updates is not a problem because they control the satellite imagery companies, even the ones that are based in North America. So that's not a problem for them. But still, they have their own satellites anyway. So some of the examples, right? Roofs painted in a specific color. This is a marker. Again, it's not only the roof, right? It's not like only because the house has a roof painted in a specific color, it means that it's something. It's the combination of that plus the house having or the building having a high paramilitary score, plus other houses with similar roofs also having paramilitary score in a way that is statistically significant. That is not, it's definitely not a random occurrence. The system takes all these things into account. Other examples are specific basketball courts, like the ones that there's a notable example in Lake Point Estates, like 3 houses down my house in Lake Point Estates. There's a couple of houses with basketball courts of a specific color of orange. That specific color is the marker. It's not any basketball color. It has to be that color, right? Also pools, like the pools on the backyards, pools of a specific size with the specific shape have a meaning. And they could mean different things depending on the size of the pool, the shapes of the corners of the pool, and the orientation of the pool, right? Like an arrow. Sometimes it means it points to a specific thing, right? And all these things are detectable because, for example, with like the weakness of this is the fact that it's something that was made to be repeatable in a repeatable fashion. And that is a weakness because it means that it can be detected. For example, let me give you an example, and this is documented in the website. In the case of the pools, tracking, like having the UA index, right? And knowing where the paramilitary scores. If I wanted to demolish this network from the leaves, like from the ground up, I would start looking at because the pools are a marker of prominence often. Notable example of this is an Angel Vargas, right? After they successfully stole Calculator Health from me, then he got this pool deployed in his backyard with a specific shape that matches other pools with a specific orientation. So that's how I know that he got promoted, because of the timing of building that pool and how it correlated with important events that happened related to intellectual property test. That was the marker of the promotion. Angel Vargas from ConocoPhillips, the husband of Maria Alejandra Vargas da Costa, I think is the name. Angel Vargas da Costa. Anyhow, if I wanted to demolish this, right, from the ground up, I would look for properties marked in the geo index with high paramilitary scores that have this type of pools. And then I would track the makers of the pool, like which were the companies that built the pools, because those companies must have the blueprints for all these standardized pools that they deploy as markers. And once I get the blueprints, it's game over, because then I could find all the pools in the world, right? Or at least in the country, or at least in Texas, right? So the fact that what I'm trying to say, I'm just making the example of the pool, but the fact that the technique of creating the marker is repeatable is a tremendous weakness, because it can lead to detection at a massive scale. Detection and categorization, really, of all the individual agents. And categorization is important because they may have 2% of the world population working for them in one way or another. If you think about that, it's millions of people. You cannot interview millions of people. But if you can identify the prominent ones, then the scope of the investigation gets reduced tremendously. And that's a problem that you could tackle, that reduced scale. So those are examples, right, of markers. So I have there's a marker it's not universal, but in this area, the houses that have this white roof is a marker, okay? And this house particularly is a super important house. And the system believes that it's directly connected to Vladimir Padrino Lopez, a yacht and a judge in Florida. And this house has also a name marker on the street name that it's Imperial. You see the street name is Imperial Point Drive. Let me see if I can find the actual. Yeah, so this is the address of that house, 2148 Imperial Point Drive, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33308. This is a very important house for this network in the US, one of the most important properties. It could tie this directly to Vladimir Padrino Lopez, maybe even Diosdado Cabello. All I'm saying is from the pipeline. These are not guesses. All this coming from that analysis at this massive scale that I'm describing. Now, also tied to that house, there's another property, this one, 550 John King Road, Crestview, Florida, 32539. And that property is this one. And you can see in this one, this roof painted orange. This house has this property, has a super high paramilitary score. It's very close to what the system believes is a paramilitary compound near the border of Alabama and Florida, if I recall correctly. Let me zoom out to see. Yes, yes. It's in Florida, but near the border with Alabama. Okay. And the marker here of prominence, besides the score, the paramilitary score, is this roof painted orange. Okay. That's a marker. And you see also has the John, this John and this, both of these. John is a marker, and I'll show you another example of this John in a minute. And King is also another type of marker of prominence, right? So this, but anyway, and it ends in 0, which is tied to the financial channel. Any way, look, the street address is so short, and it's encoding so much prominence information in it, combined with the satellite imagery. This is another principle in distributed systems, like the scarcity of storage. And when something is short and at the same time encodes a lot of data, is because it's very prominent. That's another signal. Yeah, so this is another example, right? There's another example I wanted to show you. It's about the empty lots marker. There's a marker that is houses that have an empty lot next to it. That means that person is prominent. Also serves to help with radio frequency eavesdropping avoidance, but it's also a marker of prominence. And there is an example I have. Yeah, this one. So this is a very interesting illustrative example, right? So this property here, 6, channel 6 is basically intelligence, right? Note that the photo of a street view, the street view, they also use it in the same way, right? They encode things into the images, and those things have a meaning. In this case, this image is not, I'm clicking on the house, but the image I get is the image of a wall, okay? And wall, like a barrier, it's a marker of that denotes function and prominence. And the function is usually defensive intelligence, okay? And there's a lot of properties that have been detected with this type of images in a street view. There's one in Ukraine, which is the highest ranking property in Ukraine in terms of paramilitary score. And it also has the photo of the wall as the street view photo. So what I'm trying to give this example is to say that they use a street view photo as a way to transmit information in the way I'm describing, by encoding things in the photo. Like in this case, the presence of that wall is the encoded information. And the decoded information is that this person is tied to a defensive intelligence role that is critical for this network, right? And the fact that the address starts with, it's only 6, so 06, right? It tells me that it's a very prominent intelligence officer. And now, on top of that, he has not 1, but 2. You see, there's 1 here, and there's another 1 here. 2 empty lots exactly next to the house. So it's very prominent. 1 lot means prominent, 2 lots means super prominent. And there are houses that have 3 lots, empty lots, next to the house. Now, I have to say, these properties are in Florida. You can see it's close to the water, right? These are ones of the most desirable real estate lots in Florida. But yeah, they kept these 2 lots empty. These lots are worth a lot of money, but they're not building anything on them because they're using them as markers. Now, another thing I wanted to mention about this property, right? Specifically, look at the pool, right? Look at where the pool is pointing to. And so imagine that you are in this spot. Let's mark it here. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. Imagine that you're standing exactly on this spot, okay? And that you have, well, right now you can see in the image there's a roof, but imagine that you can put a device, an electronic device transmitting a signal on that roof, okay? Imagine for a second, just for a second of the argument. And imagine that you want to intercept that. And these things that I'm going to mention, I've learned from observation by observing how they were intercepting my traffic for years, right? I have no technical training on this. I may be wrong. Maybe a person that does this for a living actually has a better idea or a better formed idea. But I'm going to tell what I observed and what I believe, how I believe they do it, right? So there's 2 types of devices, right? Radiant devices, like a cell phone, where the signal is emitted radially, like in a circle, in all directions. And there's also directional devices, like a Starlink terminal, like where the signal is transmitted upwards with an angle. and downwards with a similar angle. So depending on the type of device is the type of interception they're going to use. In the case of directional satellite links, the important points of interception are the true north of the device, the true south, and the true west and the true east, right? So if you, for example, if you put another terminal here in this location, imagine that you put another terminal here in this lot, right? Imagine this is a connection and you manage to put another terminal there with the same MAC address of the original terminal. Could eavesdrop, you could listen to everything that is coming down because you're exactly on the true north, right? So that's why they put the empty lots, because those empty lots, that's one of the reasons, right, to be markers. But the second reason is because those empty lots together, I don't know, I could measure this with Google Earth tools to measure distances, but let's assume that this is, I don't know, 200 meters, more or less, right? Assume that, right? So with that distance, it would make it harder to intercept the downlink, unless they have a very sophisticated interception devices, very good antennas and such. So that's why they deploy the empty lot markers. That tells me that probably the method of communication of this house is set a little, because the way they're protecting it is by using the empty lots, and it has this larger street with free transit next to it. So if it was a radial device, which is the second option, like a cell phone, the way they intercept it is by traveling perpendicular at a constant speed relative to the target. And that way they can reverse triangulate or isolate the MAC address. And after they do that, they can just make a clone of that cell phone and get all the traffic that the cell phone is receiving, including cookies and everything, right? That's how they steal the cookies from cell phones. So you see, in that sense, for radial devices, this house is very weak, because anybody could drive a car at a constant speed through this street. I think even on both directions, it's a two-way street, right? So even on both directions, and they would be able to clone any cell phone in this property, right? So this property is very weak for radial interception, but at the same time is very strong against satellite downlink interception. So that tells me that what they're protecting here is a downlink. The antenna is probably the roof of the house itself. The roof is the antenna. And I would guess it's deployed here, exactly in this point. Why I say that? Because if you look closely, and this, I say that one have to pay attention, right? If you put an antenna exactly on this location, I'm going to put the pin in there so you can see what I mean. If you wanted to place an object on the true north, you can't, because you have the 20 lots. If you want to place it on the true east, you can't. The image here is like a shadow and you cannot see clearly, but first you have this street over here, right? So you cannot put anything static in there because of moving all the time. And then on the other side of the street, what you have is like a park. There's no buildings in there. It's like literally a park. And of course, this building is controlled by them as well, obviously. But if there was anybody standing here with a device, they would see it with the security cameras they probably have on this. But the point is that there's no physical structure anywhere, and there's just like a landscaped area, right, where everything is visible. That's what aligns with the true east of this property they're protecting, right? And if you zoom out, the rest is water, so there's no way really to put anything. And if you look towards the west, that specific point in the house aligns exactly with the street itself. You can't put anything on the street because there's a street. And on top of that, they have these cars parked Moscow style, as you can see here, surveilling that nobody parks in there, right? If somebody parks, the system automatically, I imagine, automatically stops the transmissions. The same idea that I do with my own radio frequency eavesdropping avoidance system, right? If the cameras that are installed in those vehicles detect anything that is foreign to this area, or the probes that are listening for MAC addresses, detect a MAC address that is foreign to this area, then they automatically kill. It's a kill switch, and they kill all transmissions. So nothing comes to the downlink. It's exactly the same thing that I'm doing. It's interesting that this house is positioned in a way that it aligns perfectly in all directions. If you look at the true house, it's the same. This point aligns with the parking lot here, right? And of course, they have the cars parked Moscow style, protecting that parking lot just in case, right? So there is no way really to deploy a downlink interception device for satellite connections near this property. It's just impossible. And so you see, like by observation, I can tell you that the antenna itself is likely exactly, not even, this is a big house, right? It could be 6,000 square feet from what I can see from here. And I can tell you the device is deployed here, and it's probably in the roof it's the roof itself, right? But anyhow, so that's the technique of, I was saying all this to give the example of the two prominence markers being the empty lots. But then I expanded to show how you can use these geofeatures to work against them, because you can infer exactly what they're doing by just looking at how they set up the house. And not only that, but also how prominent is the person that is tied to that house. So this person at this specific address, 6 Winona Lane, Sea Ranch Lakes, Florida, 33308, is a very prominent person, I can tell you. Very important person, and it's tied to an intelligence defensive role, as in a war. Not defensive in an economic sense, no, in a war or war-making sense, as we've seen in Ukraine and in other places, or this agent with the last name Barrier at Lake Point State. So in his case, the marker is in the name. His last name is Barrier, as in a wall. It's a synonym to wall, right? He's not as prominent as this one, of course. He's in the same line of work. Let's put it that way. Okay, so that's about markers. Okay, so now with all the context, right? Let's do the quick postmortem of yesterday. So yesterday, they were panicking, really. It was chaos for them. Like, they were driving erratically. They weren't sure what to do. They tried different techniques. They followed me, tracking me ahead, tracking me from behind, long distance buffers, short distance. Like, they tried everything, right? And more of an observation of mine, their faces, right? Like their demeanor, if I can say it in a way, was very different. Like they're in a state of panic. And I'm gonna show some examples. So yeah, so let's start with the Dockerhood, right? So the Dockerhood was this one. It's called Alden Park Kingsland. It's an apartment complex, one of these that they deploy, right? All over the place. The address is 18021 Kingsland Boulevard, Houston, Texas, 77094. And it's, again, I haven't run this through the pipeline, but I saw a lot of vehicles that, because I trained the models of my system, I know more or less what are the important features, and I saw a lot of features, like visually myself, being a human, not a computer. So I think this is a gold mine, like the footage of this complex. You'll find a lot of interesting people in there. So that's one observation. The other thing I want to mention, like if you scroll out, look at the size of the buffer zone of this apartment complex, right? Miles. So this is a very important routing point for them. The apartment complex on itself has a paramilitary score of about 1.3 million. And I think you can see that here somewhere. Yeah, so here I have the map, right? So this is that apartment complex. You see the score is 1.341 million. And so this is important because given the size, so to give a comparative idea, right? So Diosdado Cabello's in Caracas is probably 5 times the size of this, because the size is important, because the bigger you can get more points in. His complex, his paramilitary complex where he lives, is probably 5 times the size of this complex in aggregate. And I think he has a total score of like 2.5 million or something like that, if I recall correctly. This is not that far off, and it's smaller, meaning there's more density in this one. So this is an important place for the Diosdado Cabello. Yeah, and the buffer zone compares that, and you can see by the buffer zone that this is mostly receiving signals. So first of all, this is protected against downlink interception, not necessarily radial interception, because you can pass vehicles over here, unless the ones that are protected against radial interception are the ones on the bottom of the complex, like here, okay, like at 29.77351 latitude. Those will be protected against that, but not the others. So this is mostly for downlink interception protection, and the signals are coming from the north because of the angle and where the buffer zone is positioned. You can tell that it's mostly from the north, so Austin, basically, and from the east, okay? So it's protected on the east side, which means the signal is coming from the west. And this is protected on the south, meaning the signal is coming from the north, because of the angles it would be needed, okay? Also, importantly, note the presence of a Bitcoin ATM feet away from this complex, right? Because that's how they get paid, the agents in Bitcoin with these ATMs, so they don't pay taxes like the rest of us. Another data point there. If I was law enforcement, I would look for the footage of that Bitcoin depot ATM to see who went there to make deposits and withdrawals. And in that line of thinking, I also wanted to suggest if anybody ever looks into this and the kidnapping of my son, which is important to me, and it's an injustice really, I would suggest looking whether the lawyer, Morgan Ebner, had made withdrawals on any of these Bitcoin depot ATMs in Katy, Texas, or in Houston. I don't know. It occurred to me that maybe they were not that smart that she went to one of those ATMs, and those ATMs have cameras and could be subpoenaed. Or the establishments where they deploy, because they usually deploy them like in gas stations or mini markets and things like that, which have security cameras. And maybe she went to one of those. So it could be good for my son. Anyhow, so that's the observation about that Dockerhood. Now, yesterday, I also went to another interesting one, which is this one. Let me show you. It's called Spring Lake Katy. And this is a small community, gated, very small, very exclusive. Not as exclusive as Lake Point Estates, but almost. And it's interesting. I want to like mix a little bit two subjects into this one. This is the area I would think where, how do I frame this? This might be, and it's not yet, right? I think the world is obviously still enslaved. But if the world ever gets unenslaved, gets freed from this network, this would have been the place where that freedom was born. Because this was the place where Penelope Suarez took me running, where they were extracting all this information from me to steal my technologies. And this is where I started evading the interceptions, at the very beginning of the last 4 years. And this is where I realized what they were doing and what eventually led to all this. But this is the place where I've noticed. This is the place where I woke up to what was happening, basically. So I can explain that real quickly. So we used to run. So let me show you. Yes. So my house is somewhere over here, right? So I used to meet Penelope here in this corner, which is street where Agent Enrique Morales from the ICE, so the federal agency, lives supposedly, right? He told me that he lives there. I think maybe he doesn't live there. I don't know. But it could be a safe house, right? Not his real house. And he made a comment about being undercover. Maybe that was to explain in case I look for the records or something. I don't know. So anyhow, we used to meet here and we used to walk, and his house is this one, right? Of course, the last one in the row, like in that dead end street, protected by the huge buffer zone. He's protected against downlink interception basically in 3 out of the 4 directions of this axis. Because what he has on the back is just a park, and on the east is a park. On the north, his house doesn't really align with anything. The true north is empty. And we used to make this route over here. It's like a big circle, and then go around the Spring Lakes gated community on this area over here. And we did all this circle. I think it's something like 4 kilometers. And we did that, I don't know, 3 or 4 times in a row. And then they would basically place the agents in key points where they would intercept me. For example, in this bridge, right? This is a big intersection. This was a big intersection point. The other one was somewhere around here in this corner, right? 29.700945. And they had a few others. And that's how I started noticing this. Anyhow, this gated community, I have to tell you, all the times, and I used to run here 5 times a week, and it was runs that would take an hour and a half sometimes. And during all those times for years, I never saw anybody on the back of any of those houses. That was another thing that was strange to me. Because those houses were being used to intercept my cell phone as I was passing by. These are some of those houses where you never see the occupants, even though I was running for years in that park, every day almost. I never saw anyone in the backyards of those houses that are next to the park. So anyhow, I managed to go to Spring Lake yesterday because it's a gated community, and if somebody doesn't let you in, you cannot get in. But yesterday, the gate was open, so I came in. And I did a round around the complex, right? And they started panicking when I did that. So I'm going to show you some pictures that came from the system. And so first one is this one. Yeah, so this couple, right? I have to tell you, at this point, after 4 or 5 years of this, I have a very thick skin. These people don't get under my skin because I'm used to this, right? And I can manage them with my clothes and with the technology I have. And so I'm saying this because what I want to say is a very strong statement. And I want to make sure that I convey that it's not, if I'm making this statement, it's because it's really that way. Like these two people were really stalking me yesterday. Like there's no other way to put it. This was a stalk, right? This guy was parking on the corners, waiting for me to appear around the corner consistently. And I'm talking about a period of maybe 5 minutes tops, right? He intercepted me like, I don't know, in 9 different occasions, right? In 2 different communities, inside of this community and even outside of this community. This is a stalking, really, at this point, these two people. You can see their faces there. Then what he did, just to make sure I drive that point home, once I went out, so I went out on this gate. Yes, I went out on this gate, right? So when I was here at the gate going out, he was waiting exactly in this corner here, hiding. So the car was hidden on the corner, right? I could only see the back of the car. And I guess this is another reason why they have 2 people, because one is driving and the other one is the spotter. So the woman was the spotter in this case. She was looking through the back window to see if I turned left or right or straight, right? To then inform the app so they could send people to follow me on the next leg. That's basically the idea. They split it by legs. But they were waiting, like seeing what decision I made, right? What decision I took, if I made a left or a right as I was exiting the compound here. But what I did instead is that I followed him, right? Because I anticipated that he was on this dead end street. So he trapped himself in there, right? So I came on this direction and I used the opportunity that there was an Amazon truck. So I got behind the truck so he wouldn't see me that I was approaching, because then he could reverse and then just leave in a different direction. So when he saw me, I was already almost here, right? I don't know, 100 feet away. And then, of course, he decided to go straight, although it's a dead-end street. And then he parked the car on this driveway, which I imagine is not his house. It's probably a safe house. But he parked it there as if it was his house, but he did not get out of the car, nor open the gate of the garage. He just stayed there, right? I didn't want to create an incident, so I left. But I took a picture of that situation as well. This one. And you can see the license plate is clearly recorded there. It seems to be, I have a better resolution picture, but it seems to be Frank Gold Kilo or Zulu 1497. And it's a red Lincoln compact SUV hatchback. So that's that. Another character that was working with them in combination. So they were marking my location from different sides of the compound, right? So informing the app so the other one could catch me, basically. The other one was this Jeep with license plates, W as in whiskey, B as in Bob, D as in Delta, 5A74. And he also was stalking me. Like at the beginning, he was in one corner of the house, then he moved the truck. And then as I passed by, then he moved the truck again. And then I went around. And then when I reached the corner of that house, which, let me show you which house is that. 1 second. Yes. So this is the address of that house where he was waiting to stalk me. 27803 Stonehurst Lane, Katy, Texas, 77494. And of course, we can always, even if I don't have the system, we can go to Fort Bend County Property Search, and we can probably search for that address. Okay, so it's somebody called, supposedly, right? Asef Eduardo and Rosiris E. and the use of Connor Associates, which is the company that helps them cheat on their property taxes. And this is documented on the website as well. And if we have any doubts, we can go to spyhealth.org, paramilitary crypto, and look for that address. Yeah, so it has a paramilitary score of crypto payments with a score of 12,000, 9 meters from the center of the property. So this is definitely a prominent agent stalking me, right? I don't know what else, what else I can offer to show that this person is definitely an agent. So here's the exact point, right? The point is exactly here. Interesting. Yeah, this is another roof marker that the system identified before. This thing that looked like a fan. It's a thing. Anyhow, so he was stalking me there, right? In combination with the other two so they were working together against me, basically, to figure out where I was going. His face got also captured. So here's there you can see the guy. So that's the man that was stalking me yesterday with the other two. And this is very telling. Like, he tried to block the street with the truck. Like, you can see how he drove the truck. He was going to block me from continuing driving with the truck, which is not a police officer. You cannot block the street. But this is how they think. When somebody's inconvenient to them, they break the law. In my case, in my house, they park cars in front of my house. They do everything they want. But if I do the same, then he was going to block the street. But anyhow, I didn't let him block the street. Empty with my truck, he avoided the collision, right? Because getting into an accident with me, I think would probably be not a good idea for an agent. Because of many things, like the surveillance gear that they have in the car, the software they have in their phones. They don't know if the FBI is watching, they could be arrested. So I think it's probably not a good idea to collide with my car. So he stopped, but he was going to block the street. And then he got out of the truck and tried to stop me manually, waving his hand in front of my truck. And all this is recorded in video. So that's that. And also, I wanted to mention there is a house on the back of the community, and this house is marked in the index, and I've known about this house for a long time. As soon as I got the geo index, I realized that this is an important house. And it has the two flags marker, which is also documented in the website. Like, these two flags positioned in this specific way has a meaning in their system. And this is how they mark the properties. And it's decodable both via Street View. So there are properties in a Street View that have these two flags marked. And also some agents, the intelligence officers, I would say, know the meaning of this marker. So they could, even without the app, they could go to that house if they need something. I think it would be like a fake police station, like a clandestine police station, something like that. It's something kind of official within their network. It could be like a law enforcement. That's the feeling I get from having scanned hundreds of Dockerhoods here in Katy over the last 2 years. This could be an official facility within the network. And there is one that is close to my house as well, here in Valleyside. I'll take the opportunity to show you that. So if you go to 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas, which is this one. If I do this, so this house over here. Oh, they've replaced the Street View photo. See, these people they're silly. Because this just confirms, right, that so in this house over here, you can see the two flags in there. But you see what they did. So they replaced the Street View photos by a photo of when the house was in construction, like in 2011. These houses were built all in 2011. And like, it's the only house. Oh, they replaced all these houses. Look at that. They're silly, really. So this is a marker, right? I could just look for houses that look under construction in the system, right? I could turn this into a signal and detect them all. I'll do that. Yeah. So, for example, these houses, right? They're not under construction, but these ones are. It's just silly. Okay. So that's what I wanted to mention about that. But there's another note I want to make. And sorry, this is taking long, but it's just a lot of observations, but I wanted to deliver them because otherwise I might forget. So if we go back to Spring Lake, Katy, as I mentioned, this is the park where we used to run, okay? And this that I'm going to say, it's an observation that I realized this years ago, but I didn't really understand it, right? But like a year ago, or when I captured the geoindex, I understood. So the dynamic with Penelope Suarez in this park is that we would meet in the corner of the street where Agent Enrique Morales supposedly lives, and then we would start walking to warm up our legs, okay? And we walk sometimes for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and we would start running. And then at the end, we would walk some more to cool down. And during these walks, we would have technical talks. Like I would talk to her about things that I was doing with either Calculator Health or with key opinion leaders. And I would give her updates on the challenges I was facing with the attacks from Liana Technologies and how I was countering the attacks, or when I was building the servers, the parts I was buying, things like that. And the reason I did that, I thought I was talking to a friend and I had no idea that I was under this level of surveillance. And like I saw her as my friend, and she's a very smart woman. I have to say this, right? I don't know if the comments she made on the technical side of things, she's not an engineer, she's a nurse, right, by training. But I could explain technical concept, of course, in a way that is not so technical. I wouldn't like use technical jargon, but I would explain the idea behind something, like a concept, okay? What I'm doing with when I say some things about the patterns and things like that, like I try to put it in a language that could be understandable by a wide audience that is not necessarily super technical. Okay. And she would give me good suggestions. Like she would generally, but I don't know at this point if the suggestions were from her or if she was being directed by the man that she was paired with on what to tell. But the suggestions were very good. So what I'm trying to say is that I don't know if she was generally that smart or that could understand these concepts and actually reply to the ideas I was bouncing off her, or if she was being fed what to tell me. I don't know. But the responses she gave me were pretty good. So we developed this dynamic in which I would consult, or not consult, but like I would bounce ideas of her because it was useful for me. Anyway, we did this on this course of walking around this circle of this lake, okay? And this went on for years. And of course, I understand now that they were listening to everything I said. And then if I was doing something, they would do something to prevent it, right? That's how they win in business. That's their technology, really. But I'm saying all this because this situation resembles a lot of a situation I saw many years prior at Google. So when I first joined Google, I was assigned to a manager called Kyle Scopes, and he had this particular management technique in which he would take engineers out for a walk. And this was his thing. Like his job was to take engineers out of the building for walks, to talk about technical subjects. What are you doing? What projects you're working on? Give me your updates. He would give suggestions. He would say, well, have you thought of doing it this way? But it was a role strikingly similar to Penelope's role. So I understood this technique of management in a way, right? What I'm trying to say is that when I was doing these walks with Penelope, I felt like she was my manager in some occasion, like she was my technical manager, right? Like the role that Kyle Schultz had at the GWS team, the Google Web Server team at Google, managing me in 2010, 2011. I understood that this technique really comes from Piero Midyar, right? Take the engineer to a place where conversations and phone can be eavesdropped by the Chinese and by the Iranians and the Venezuelans, so we can steal the ideas of the engineer. So this is the way that they, back in the days, right, before they took control of Google, because at this point they control Google like a puppet. But back in the days, I guess this is how they started stealing the information from Google, right? By taking the engineers on walks. And the rationale for doing this was that like it was a more relaxed environment and to take the conversation out of the business place to make it more relatable. There was a rationale behind that management technique that was given to the engineer. It was given to me. But in reality, the true purpose, I think, it was to facilitate the eavesdropping interception by the Chinese using and the Iranians and the Venezuelans using the technologies that they have. And I have to say, Kyle Schultz, probably after Jeff Dean, is probably one of the most dangerous engineers. The damage is already done, but because he controlled with the Google Web Server and psychic the thing that suggests the queries when you type on Google search, he made it, or he made sure that it was made in a way that it would make network decryption trivial for criminal network. And I have a lot of data that I can give authorities, right? But just to give you a low-hanging fruit, there is a type of request in Google Wiz code base that is called Gen 204, GEN 204. And this request, this is specific, it's like a ping that when you go to Google search or when you use Chrome address bar, it's like a ping that the client sends to the Wiz server to signify something, right? Doesn't matter what, but it's used in different contexts. Now, this Gen 204 request has a property, which is that the response to the request is empty, okay? So the request functions by sending information in the request. When the server gets it, asynchronously parses the information, logs it, but then it responds to the browser or to the client with an empty response. And this is the key. This is what makes the interception and the network decryption possible or super easy. Because the criminal networks suppose, right, that they managed to capture the MAC address or the IP address of the target. Now they have that piece of information. They know the user agent of the client, and now they also know that the response is going to be empty. And because the response is empty, the decryption is trivial. They can trivially find a key, a network cell key, that can decrypt that empty response. And if that key can decrypt that, having the question, having the answer, so you find the key, that key works for other requests as well within that SSL context. So that's how they do it. And all this was made possible because Carl Schultz put that Gen 204 empty response in there. And again, I'm not saying this only because he was the manager, but because he's marked, there's a lot of signals. And this is documented on the website, to the point that I reported him to the IRS as well, along with his manager, who was Bharat Medaratta, who's also a very prominent name from India, and he's from South Asia. Carl Schultz is not Indian, though. If I was to guess, probably FSB, based on the way he speaks and his physical characteristics, right? Okay, so that's the Kyle Penelope management technique. Okay, now I'm going to change subjects a little bit. I'm going to try to speed it up. So an update so in yesterday's video, I talked about this Iranian Venezuelan joint venture for this market that had this store inside that sold Venezuelan products, that my former partner told me that her friend was the owner of that store. So I saw her yesterday and inquired a little bit to learn more about the store and the friend. So she told me the store was called Mi Querencia. It's spelled MIQUERENCIA. And she told me the name of the friend was or is Odalis. Okay. Now this is interesting, and I cannot draw any conclusions from this, but it could be an implementation of the familiar names pattern. Okay. I say this because in my family, close to my family, there's an individual by the name Adalis. It's the same name, but with an A instead of an O. So the level distance would be 1 between the two names. The two names. Adalis Molina is the sister of Edivelto Molina, and she was in a relationship with my uncle, or is, I don't know. Supposedly they broke up last year when things started escalating, coincidentally. They magically broke up after more than 10 years. But I don't know if that is true or if it was a fabrication to say that they're not together anymore. But Adalis was or is in a relationship with my uncle for many years, more than a decade. Since 2008, those days when I was working on the Classifieds website. And she is the sister of Edivelto Molina Molina. And the relationship is or was so close that she moved in with my uncle and my grandmother. So this would be my maternal grandmother. So what I'm saying is the sister of Edivelto Molina Molina lived in the same house for more than a decade with my maternal uncle and my maternal grandmother. So that level of infiltration. The owner of this store, her name apparently was Odalis, the same name, but with an O instead of an A. Okay. So it could be an implementation of the familiar names patterns. And in that case, it would make me lean more towards this is related to Harold, because if they're implementing the familiar names patterns, it would be because it's targeting me. So I don't see this person, right? So I'm blind to this. They want to blind me to this observation. So it has to be somebody close to me. So it has to be Harold, right? Anyhow, I looked in the records manually because I don't have my system here, and I found two people with the name Odalis with two different spellings. One was I and one with Y. Okay. Both are prominent. Both are agents. Both are marked in the index. So one is called Odalis with I, Pons, P-O-N-S, and as in Nicole, Morales. And it has ties to a company called O&F Logistics. And the address is 12050 Big John Street 77038. Notably, this has the John marker, the same marker that we saw on the 550, what was it, the one with the roof, 550 John, no, oh, this is interesting. Let me look it up, just for completeness. Yeah, 550 John King Road, Crestview, Florida, 32539. So this one is 12050 Big John Street, 7703. But it has the marker John and it's marked in the index. So could be, right? Could be that this house is tied to that market. The other one is Odalis, but with a Y. I think this is the right, it's closer to the spelling of the Odalis Molina. That one is with Y, I believe. But this one is Odalis Downs, Downs. And the address is 1502 Partnership Way, 77494. Now, here, the word partnership in the street name and the fact that I'm investigating a partnership between two supermarkets, I don't know, seems odd, right? Strange coincidence, let's call it that way. And this property is near the Houston Community College, I believe, yes. And it's protected by this park acting as a buffer zone. So, it could be, right? It could be an important property. Right, and it's aligned with the street as well. It's protected by this parking lot, right? So it could be that it's related to Harold in some capacity. I'm not saying that it's Harold, but it could be related. The other thing I wanted to mention about this other one, the Big John Street, is interesting because it's located in a kind of an aggregation of houses that looks a lot like the Bizarro Valley side we talked about yesterday. Look at the buffer zones that it had. Not as big as Bizarro Valley side, but it's definitely a well-protected location, okay? And this one seems to be like a storage facility or something like that. So this could be, it's a logistics company, right? Logistics is a big thing for them. So there could, one of these two, right? There could be something in there, but the fact that the name is made me think that maybe it's related to Harold in some capacity. Okay, and the last observation I want to give you today is about something in the Form 211. I have it here. Oh, there's one more thing. Let me show you this. Could be important. If you go to Spy Hell, yeah, so this is Spy Hell, and this is the points. So not all the points. These are the top 24 points in terms of a score close to Spring Lakes, Katy, Texas. What I find clear here is that a lot of points fall in the water. And as I said, I've been running on this park. I was running on this park for years. And I never saw anybody or anything in the water, like a boat or a maintenance company, nothing. So why do they have these points in the water here? It's a small artificial lake. It occurred to me that maybe they have equipment installed in that lake, antennas and such, I don't know, as they were doing in Lake Point Estates with the Lake Pro Inc. company. And this is documented in the website. So they had this company, Lake Point Estates had artificial lakes as well. And they had this company install equipment. The company is Lake Pro Inc. interception equipment, I believe, in the lake and in the border of the lake, like shore, this artificial shore. And I have even a video of how I believe they manufactured the antenna. It's like a mixture of cement that they pour in the border. And the thing I believe acts as an antenna because they were putting it in a very specific place where my antenna was pointing towards. It was in a period of time when I mentioned something about a specific channel that I was going to use, and they went and installed that thing. So it appeared to me that maybe, and remember, materials engineering, right? These people are able to embed antennas into things that you wouldn't think. Vehicles, school buses, airplanes. And it's materials engineering, really, the technology, to create these antennas, right? So it's possible that they have something in the water in there. So I wanted to mention that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is about the Form 211. So I'm going to go to form211.org. It's here. So IL stands for in-laws, okay? So these are people that are fathers or mothers of agents that were posing as romantic interests. Okay. It doesn't mean that I had a relationship with the lady. In some cases, I did. Like in the case of Ana Colayo, I was engaged to her. Peter Colayo is here. But in some other cases, either for one reason or another, it didn't materialize into a relationship, but they were trying to position that way, or they did the effort. And all of them are agents, most of them all of them tied to Venezuelan intelligence, except for the father of Jovan Sharif. And I believe Jovan is with the Iranian intelligence, right? And she was employed as a contractor by Google. And that's how they inserted her into my life. So that's one observation I wanted to give. And the other one is about this house. And I'm going to close with that. There is a house. Yeah, this person, Aleman Barbarita, from 4002 Siegel Street, Houston, Texas, 77009 and 3252. And so this is a prominent person. I'm not going to give much details here because I don't want to give anything away. But if law enforcement ever sees these videos, I would recommend strongly looking into this person. It could be something important. Well, I'm going to close it today with that. Sorry, it was a long session, and I hope that it's useful. Okay. So thank you so much again, and see you on the next one.